My name's Pauric. I'm just going to do a little talk today about system design for audiovisual performance. So it's really kind of looking at the audiovisual system that I've kind of developed over the last number of years. Probably the thing I get asked the most. It's kind of nice to just maybe share some of that information, and hopefully people might be able to use that information more, even not, within their own projects, or maybe know how to not do things as well. That might be successful for other people. First of all, a little bit about me. My name is Pauric. I'm from Monaghan originally, based in Dublin now, and I work as an artist and creative technologist, and do a lot of teaching as well. As an artist, I work predominantly with audiovisual performance and installation, but I do other things as well. And these are kind of just a random selection of projects that I've worked on for the last number of years. Some of them are collaborations, some of them are solo projects. The audiovisual performance and the audiovisual installation is probably the type of thing that I do the most. As a creative technologist, I also kind of collaborate with studios and designers or other artists and kind of help them build their projects. So kind of filling in the gaps of if they need some technical assistance with certain aspects or some guidance on certain aspects. It's just a way to kind of bring in a project and develop that section as well. And these are generally collaborations, subtractions of an installation for Warner Music for Ed Sheeran's album launch, and there was actually a few of us who worked on that project. And the Lovely Days stage, which was a collaboration with Freeman, an Irish artist. So it's been a kind of wide array of stuff, but today I'll be talking mostly about my show Structures. So Structures was a show that was developed or created in 2024. It was very kindly funded by the Arts Council of Ireland. It was the biggest project I've ever done. It was 5 months of straight dedicated time just working on that project, which was amazing. It was really, really nice. No other project same time. And during that project, I developed an audiovisual instrument, I guess, or a system or a tool. And then once that was kind of developed, I then composed a 60-minute performance using that system. And I've been kind of touring around that show since then. So this was a clip from APE Festival in Amsterdam last year. And I'm going to show a video just to give an idea of what that is. It's from kind of the end of the show, so it's maybe a bit more intense, but well. I won't show you the full 60 minutes. But that's a little tip from the end of it. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about that project. Firstly, from the kind of the concept, what was I trying to do with that show, and what was the ideas that I was trying to build into the instrument, and that's kind of the real kind of core of the talk. We'll talk a little bit about the technical side of it. So, how did I implement those concepts into the actual instrument when I was developing it, and then we'll look at an example which kind of just steps through one of the tracks from it, and hopefully makes sense. So the concept, my work is based around this idea of translation. So taking ideas or forms or material maybe from one medium and translating that into another medium. 90% of the work, or most of the work related in this regard, is collecting information about sound and then translating that into image. So kind of very straightforward, taking data from one and then translating it into the other. So that was the first thing that I wanted to embed within the instrument. And I wanted to have an element of experimentation within that system. So not just technical experimentation, but kind of experimenting with different relationships that you could kind of focus on when you're talking about a relationship between sound and image, like maybe how density of sound might correlate to some sort of visual composition elements like color or position or whatever that may be. So I wanted to kind of embed this idea of experimentation within the actual tool itself. I wanted to make sure that any of the ideas that I was kind of exploring within that were kept simple. And this is something that over the years of doing audiovisual composition and performance, I kind of realized that audiovisual performance is pretty intense kind of environments. There's a lot of auditory stimuli, there's a lot of visual stimuli, and sometimes the idea, if it's too complex, it doesn't really communicate well. So I wanted to keep the ideas as simple and as straightforward as possible that the audience could kind of follow along. And one of the ways that I did that was throughout the 60-minute performance, I kind of divided it up into 6 kind of movements, and each of those movements then would be one track or one idea or one theme. Okay, so one theme within that movement over roughly 10 minutes, and then keep on to the next movement. So this kind of led me to working a lot with permutations within my work. So the idea of kind of establishing some sort of simple idea and then working with permutations on that, so developing that a little bit, whether that's like, halving creating an array of it, or looking at that through depth. So just trying to think about a simple idea and then constantly kind of moving through different permutations of that idea, or how to observe it from different perspectives. And this kind of allowed me to explore a narrative within the performance, within each track in the performance. And the narrative could then be linear, or it could be non-linear as well. So you could move through that sequentially, or you could move through it in some sort of random order, or you could control it with some sort of pitch or frequency of the sound, or whatever that may be. So that was something that was kind of interesting to me. And with these kind of 4 things that I wanted to incorporate, I kind of just wanted to make sure to embed them within the actual audiovisual instrument itself. And this kind of made the technical process a little bit easier, knowing exactly what I wanted from the get-go. So, on the technical side then, I'm going to just kind of share some of the kind of technical elements that helped, that I wish I knew before I kind of started this project, and would have saved a lot of time. And just to very quickly explain what my system is. And it's TouchDesigner, of course, on the visual side. And on the music side, or the kind of sound elements, there's kind of 3. There is a modular synth, there is a drum machine, and then there's Ableton Live. And this is something that I kind of developed over a number of years before that. And I kind of like these three together, and they kind of allow me to achieve what I want to achieve with that project. Really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're working on like an acoustic instrument, like a piano or a violin, or some sort of digital like Max MSP or something like that. It doesn't really matter. You still kind of go through the same process whenever you're designing these systems. It's just how you kind of collect that data that changes. So there's kind of two sides to the technical. The first is the input, and the second is the kind of generation side. So we look a little bit at the input first. And if we go back to this kind of diagram that I had at the start of sound translating into image, and it's this idea of extracting data from sound that might be useful for me, or to help understand, or something that represents the sound. And there's lots of data there within the sound that you can actually use within an image context. So for me, I want to look at things like rhythm, pitch, frequency, timing, and then texture or timbre. So these are kind of some of the elements that I wanted to extract from the sound and be able to look at that as data in TouchDesigner. The most important thing that I kind of noticed when I was developing this work was the data formatting. It's not the most interesting topics, I'll admit, but it is probably the most important, and it's probably the one that helped me create work of that scale, i.e. like a 60-minute performance in a relatively short space of time. The way that I approached it is unique to my instrument, but depending on what your own instrument might be, that would be different. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a few moments. But for me, I kind of simplified everything down to two different types of data. There was discrete data or binary data, so it was either on or off. Okay? And it couldn't be anything in between. And that's something that's kind of useful to say. Something is triggered, I can get timing information from that, I can get if a note is on or if a note is off. My work is pretty percussion heavy, so that made sense for me to want this type of information. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was continuous values, and so anything that could exist between 0 and 1. But that was the second thing, the second type of data that I wanted. And this was the only thing that I really cared about. I didn't care if the data was pitch, I didn't care if it came from the envelope of a sound, I didn't care if it came from an outflow. It either fell into the continuous area or it fell into the discrete or binary section. And by doing that, it allowed me to kind of compose with these two elements. So if I wanted to use pitch to control a certain value, I could use, it was a continuous value, but similarly, if I wanted to use the envelope of the sound to control something, then it was also there and available to me. And what this let me do was really kind of experiment and kind of play with different ideas. So I could sketch something together in TouchDesigner, which I really love doing. It's kind of like a little, it's like a little, I don't know, maybe coloring book is not the right word, but like you get into the interface and you're just kind of like throwing things down, and it's quite playful in that regard. And then you start mapping things to the data coming from your sound. And then you want to get a bit more serious and like, okay, I want to kind of fine tune this. So I could say, okay, I want to change that instrument to another instrument, and I want to change this to another that. And that's something that's quite common when you're composing sound. But if you have everything categorized as like frequency and envelopes and this, then you're kind of rewriting your whole patch to kind of plug them in and out. So being able to kind of very quickly play with different ideas there means I could compose the work a lot quicker. We'll have a look at that in a few moments. The other side, aside from the input, is actually, I just want to mention something on this data formatting. One of the things that I ignored throughout the whole thing is polyphony. So if you're thinking about music, and you're thinking about chords, or you're thinking about multiple notes at the same time, I don't have that capability within my AV system. And I intentionally removed that because it's very complex in terms of how you handle arrays of data, okay? And it becomes very difficult when you're doing 3-note chords and moving to 4-note chords and 2-note chords. Okay? And you'll actually notice that this year system is kind of inspired by multiwave synthesis, which doesn't really deal with arrays of data. It's either it's just a CD value. And for me, working with percussion as a kind of central theme within my work, it made sense to use this approach. And possibly if I was doing like a drone project, I'd probably scrap all of this and change it so that I can see polyphony and different things like that. So depending on what it is that you're after, you can kind of tailor your data formatting to that. So getting into the generating side of things, really the big thing for me was to try and implement the permutations within the work. So find a way that I could very easily work on one idea, develop it into the next little idea, like establish it and kind of move on. And I did that by kind of creating a switch that kind of might seem counterintuitive at first, because the way it works is that kind of everything is rendering all of the time within my scene. But what I actually found was that during the performance, it meant that there was less surprises on my computer. Okay, and my computer was already running a lot of audio processes, a lot of video stuff. So the less surprises there was, the better. So that was something that I implemented. So I'm going to show that just so I can, so it makes a bit more sense, because it's a bit abstract unless I can explain that. So I'm going to the switch first. Let me just actually press play on Ableton, and then I will go there. So this is just a quick example that I put together for talk today. And here's the section of the patch is my switch. And all it is it's a table that allows me to create multiple different scenes. So here's all my scenes up here. Oh, I don't mind these. Maybe that should be zero. And you can see here that if I read this here, I can see that this column here is a single scene. And within that, then I can kind of activate and deactivate certain elements within that scene, or within that permutation. Scene. So then, whenever I go to the next permutation, I can have different elements working within that. So, keeping the audio constant in the background of changing these scenes might help to let you know what's going on. So if I change this value, I'm just working with this single element on the screen. And then if I change to the next, you'll see that it changes the actual shape that I'm working with. So here it's a rectangle in this one here. And then when I change to permutation number 2, it's working in circles. And I get permutation number 3, and then do something else. Working with lines. Now if you go to number 4, then it actually changes color. So it allows me to kind of almost like create these kind of like permutations that I have. And normally over the course of the track, I might have like 20 or 30 permutations. And then how I switch between them, and like I can either attach it to a clip in Ableton, so that I'm kind of like just moving between different permutations non-linearly, so I'm activating different clips that are linked with the sound, or I could use pitch or different things to kind of control that, or the number of maybe a kick drum, progresses through it, or whatever it might be, and obviously playing around with that gives you very different results as well. So for me, it was just a really easy way to keep everything neat and tidy, and also everything was rendering all at once within the entire scene. So it meant that as I was switching between permutations, I wasn't getting this like milliseconds of lag or whatever, which was problematic. So that was kind of it. I'll very quickly go back and talk about the input. kind of explain things there. So this is kind of the overview of my the initial patch of what's actually working within the system. And so on the left here is input, and then here is the kind of processing section, the generating section. So inside the input, it's a little bit kind of messy. Down here is I've got some TV inputs in here. I've got some MIDI coming from my drum machine, and I've got my modular synth data coming in here. And I can add acoustic instruments, or I can add Maximus video, whatever, into this. And as long as I'm kind of formatting it all together so it's all the same, then it will kind of fit in quite neatly with the rest of this project. And then I put two kind of important here that we really use these two, and two little neat and tidy data. Yep, that's it. And everything's kind of built out from that. And then inside my generating section, or my processing, and here's each of the 6 movements within the actual performance, which I use the top switch for, obviously, because I don't want them to all cook at the same time. I want to cook them just whenever I'm on that particular drum again. And while within those, and this is this one, this is then you've got your kind of switch. So it's like switch and then switch inside. Knowing which ones you want to cook all the time and which ones you don't want to cook all the time can be useful. What else did I learn over the years? So keeping things simple on the input is probably the thing that kind of helped me the most. It's just meant that like the more simple the input was, like realistically, I could actually produce work then. But if things were too complex in the input, I just kind of ran in circles, and it's constantly kind of chasing my tail, and being like, oh, I'll do this, and then I'll add this in here, and then you're trying to develop the next track, and then first track doesn't work anymore. So, like really structuring that carefully was really important. And another thing, just working with timing. So like obviously trying to keep your instruments like to a low number. So I had 3, now I've got a modular synth and obviously an 8, which is actually quite a lot because you have timing issues. So anybody working with audio is familiar with latency. But then when you have multiple different types of data, you've got MIDI, you've got TD8 and just OSC, right? OSC over UDP. And then you've got CV. So, and then there's timing difference and latency within them as well. So you've got like this literally like dimensions of latency, which is not fun at all. They're not even linked. So the latency in the audio doesn't make sense to the latency in the visuals. So you know, timing becomes you kind of lose days very quick. So trying to keep things simple in that regard works really well. So I'm not going to go too much more on this, and actually what I'll do is I will show an example from my show, so a video, which kind of, it's about 3 or 4 minutes, but it kind of shows you the progression of a track within the kind of performance, and it is edited slightly down, so it's a little bit shorter, but yeah, hopefully it, you need to switch back to the other screen. Yeah, so hopefully this will give you an idea of what that looks like in practice. Get the screen going. Okay, example.